Breaking the cycle to step forward. Authentic conversations from lived experience and a professional perspective in overcoming abuse with Tuck and Beverley Ann.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Breaking the Cycle to Step Forward podcast with myself, Tuck, and the lovely co-host,
Beverley Ann.
Welcome, everyone, and it is episode 61, and today we're talking about giving a voice to your younger self. Now, Bev, you brought this up as a topic of conversation. Where did you want to start with this?
Right, so this is where there's much discussion about recovery, healing, overcoming trauma, and it can often seem the scariest thing or part in our recovery, but when we're able to do it and we can listen to ourselves, it's amazing the breakthroughs that we can have. And it's something that some people find, it's something that, well, quite a few people I know are scared of this part of the healing, but then once they're able to listen to themselves and listen to the voice of their younger self, it really gives them grounds to like really move forward. So for instance, I always say myself, and I know many others do, that when you're recovering, it's not about going back to each and every experience of trauma. However, it's about being where you are today, but allowing your younger self, what is it you wanted to share at that time that you were unable to share? Like, for instance, your emotions. It was really sad. It was horrible. I didn't feel comfortable. That kind of thing. And that can be done by speaking in therapy or even writing it down, writing a letter to yourself.
So can I just recap for everybody? If they are feeling stuck around a certain situation or a certain feeling, that you give a voice to it. So it's almost like I would say to my 9-year-old Chris, who had experienced a certain thing, felt a certain way, but didn't have the words, the vocabulary, didn't have the emotional intelligence to actually name and verbalize and analyze whatever it is, that as an adult, I can now go back and give all of that a voice, describe it, explain it how I want, and almost sort of like break down the strength of feeling, break down the lack of acknowledgement, and to validate that experience so that I can move on from it.
Yeah. And that sounds really simple. And I know there's going to be, there's going to be people listening thinking, I can't do that. I can't do that.
What does that even mean? What does it look like?
So let's give an example. And you started to give a great example there. So, if we go back to your 9-year-old self, at that time, you're surviving that moment. So your emotions get shut down. Any feelings, you're disassociating or you're fighting or you're running. So our emotions get trapped. And we want to be heard. Everybody wants to be heard. And you yourself were trying to speak to people, but they weren't listening. Whereas now you're able to, if you wanted to, and your choice would be to either speak it or write it. Some people might do it through poetry or through music. But to actually say, how did that feel? Your younger self, how did it feel not to be heard? When you're telling the truth, it's frustrating, it made you angry, all those kind of things. And by being able to write them down, that's when, as an adult yourself, you can say, I hear you. Yeah. I'm here.
Yeah, because if I remember back to being 9, Bev, and I can just give this example, when I spoke up about the sexual abuse outside the family home with that bus driver, I did speak up. The adults did believe me. We did report it to the police. There was an investigation, but because I was a child, I believe that the adults felt it was in the best interest just to close it all down and not ever speak about it ever again. But the way that I internalized that was, even though they said I wasn't bad at the time, I internalized the fact that there was silence all around it and no one ever asked me if I was all right, etc., etc. I internalized that as if I did something bad.
Yes, exactly that. So by being able to give that space and your younger self saying that, I felt that I did something bad. It was my fault. No one's asked me how I was. You know, by being able to acknowledge that, as scary as that is sometimes, and it is scary, I'm not going to say it's not. Once you've done that, then you're able to say, okay, I hear you. I acknowledge you. And
To your younger self,
to your
yeah.
younger self. And even, how are you feeling? Just
Yeah.
checking in. And this is the scary part sometimes, because sometimes what happens is not sometimes, what happens is you actually acknowledge those emotions and it can come out. Sometimes you don't feel it straight away. Sometimes I know I'm a reflector. So if I'm doing anything like that, that might not come out for a few days. Sometimes it might come out and you bawl your eyes out. But that's part of
Yeah.
the healing, part of the release, part of being acknowledged as a young child. This was horrible. I didn't like it. And I go back to like when I was 4 and the first time anything happened with my dad, and feeling it was really wrong, but hold on, this is my dad, and I'm told I need to respect my dad, and I love my dad. Do you know what I mean? And for me to actually even say that is uncomfortable as an adult because I don't love him. But at that time, I did love him and I looked up to him. But my intuition was telling me this is wrong, this is horrible, I don't like this, I want to go. And it made me for years really question my own intuition, and our intuition is there to keep us safe. But it was like, well, I must be wrong. And I've really had to work on that.
But again, as a child and you've got your caregivers, you wouldn't think anything different, would you, than what you're living with? It's your normal. And we spoke about this many times before. So when you've got these conflicting things going on, you do love your parent, then you obviously, some people don't like what those adults are doing to them, but some children physiologically don't have any control over how they respond in those crimes of sexual abuse, assault and rape. So their bodies may be showing them that they're enjoying it. And this is no judgment. This is just biology, physiology. And then there's conflict all around that. Well, I know it was abuse potentially, especially as an adult, but I remember, not me, but some people say, I remember that I enjoyed it. And there's all of this conflicting narratives going on for victims of sexual abuse, let alone the judgment that comes outside from society. And we've spoken about this many occasions on different podcasts about how should we feel. Well,
Yeah.
no one knows because we're all going to feel different. However, we also know that if we enjoyed it or not, there's no right way of responding because you will just respond how you respond. And if you do have different thoughts and feelings about, are you gay, are you straight, I enjoyed it so it must be okay, am I going to be abuser because I've been abused, any of those kind of thoughts, we should be able to know that we can get help and support around all of that. But there seems to be a chasm in getting access to that information, that if you've gone through this, you may be thinking and feeling this, and it's okay to think and feel that way, but here's your help and your support.
And that is something, giving a voice to our younger self is so important because even today, and this is a bit of a rant, there is not that information
Yeah.
publicly aware,
No. Yeah.
and I'm not diminishing any abuse in any way. But if we look at, say, road safety, I'm just
Yeah.
giving an example, so I don't want to offend anyone. We've grown up with information about what's safe, what's not. You
Yeah.
know, even yesterday, I saw somebody was upset because their child, there was a discussion in their young school about keeping safe. And they were like, I not having my child participate in that. You're
Yeah.
sexualizing my child. And I'm like, no, sadly, it's not to sexualize your child. It's to say that your body is yours. It's
Yeah.
okay. If something feels wrong, then it is wrong for you.
It's part of prevention and protection, isn't it? And we just
Yeah,
want to reiterate that in the UK, any sexual activity with a child under the age of 16 is a crime.
yeah,
They cannot consent.
yeah,
Full stop. How that child then responds to anything they go through is just going to be normal for them. And they need help with trying to decipher their thoughts and feelings around what has happened to them. And we need to, as a society, make sure that we talk about all of this so that they don't grow up like Bev and like many other victim survivors out there, questioning their sexuality, their response, what they are going to go on to do or not, how they live their lives through coping mechanisms, whether they're negative or positive. We need a balance, and often we are on one end of the spectrum or the other. We need to be able to break the silence and the taboo so that anyone that has gone through this then can heal in the best way for them. But whilst we haven't got that information and the understanding there, then we are all going to grow up with confusion around and conflicting emotions and information around all of this. Is that fair to say?
absolutely, Chris, and so well said. Because at the end of the day, what's really sad, and I see it a lot even today, that when young people speak up, it's still an evidence-based crime. That people want the evidence, they want to listen, they don't want to. They, it's the only crime that we question the
Yeah,
victim.
yeah, yeah.
If someone's been punched in the street, we don't say, oh, are you sure you've been punched?
Yeah, where's the video evidence? Where's this? Where's
Yeah.
that?
But when it comes to sexual abuse, we do question the victim. We don't question the perpetrator. And this is something that we need to change. We need that public information everywhere about how to support someone as well who is speaking up.
Yeah, yeah. So, I've been writing posts on the ICSA recommendations for 8 days now. So I've got 12 more days to go. But ICSA recommendation 4 is all about the public awareness campaign. And I can't reiterate this enough, that this needs to happen like quite pronto. Well, it should have happened yesterday, like decades ago.
Yeah.
Just like the drink driving campaign, the
Yes.
seatbelt campaign,
Yes.
the crossing the road campaign. We all need access to this information publicly so that we don't have to keep having these conversations, Bev,
Absolutely.
Can I just share with you the Gabor Mate stance perspective on trauma, and then we can discuss this further and take it back to how would you speak to your younger self?
Yeah.
Is that all right? So Gabor Mate, if you don't know him, is a physician and author. He speaks extensively about trauma, especially in relation to addiction, mental health, and physical illness. His perspective is trauma is not only about what happens to you, but about what happens inside you as a result of what has happened. So some of these key ideas: trauma is not the event itself. It's it isn't just the external bad thing, e.g. abuse, neglect, or loss, but it's the internal wound that is left behind. So two people can go through the same event, but whether it becomes traumatic depends on how it's experienced and whether the person had support and safety. So when someone discloses like I did, even though those caregivers around me probably felt that they did the right thing at the time, it left that wound within me because no one spoke to me about it. It almost was that thing that happened and then there was pushed under the rug, under the carpet. So there's the wound that was left.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that perfectly explains it about why it's important to listen and acknowledge your younger self, because that's still in your body. That doesn't leave. That doesn't, that younger self is a big part of you. I remember a young person saying to me, I can't wait to be an adult and leave my childhood behind.
I felt that. I did that masking for 16 years for exactly that reason.
Yeah. And I think that's a big reason, big part of why disclosures happen so much later, because I did the same as well. I'm an adult now. That's my childhood, that's gone, and you're trying to distance yourself, but you can't. You're the same people.
Hold that thought. Trauma disconnects you from yourself. This is Gabor Mate. He often says trauma is disconnection from the self. In order to survive overwhelming experiences, people suppress emotions or disassociate and later lose touch with their authentic feelings, needs, and identity. And that comes back to everything that we've shared so far.
Yes. Yeah. And isn't it ironic that it's our biggest fear, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself, and I know it's for a lot of people, it's our biggest fear to actually listen to our younger self, because it's like, what am I going to hear? Whereas actually, we're constantly suppressing it. It's always there. And that's where addiction comes from, because it's like, I don't want to hear it.
I couldn't have written this any better. Addiction is rooted in trauma. Mate argues that addiction is not a choice or a genetic disease, but a coping mechanism to soothe pain. Instead of asking why the addiction, he asks why the pain. And he links that pain almost always to trauma. And there again, we were talking about the wounds that are left behind because of the people around you not doing the right thing. And sometimes they don't know what the right thing is. So the right thing in a certain period of time might have been the right thing then, but it wasn't the right thing for the person.
Absolutely. And I get very frustrated. We hear it time and time again. And I know we've said this before, but when you hear the comments, oh, that happened a long time ago, or how do you know it's true? They're just saying it. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like because the adult's a really upstanding person. Oh no, they're really lovely. Do you see what I mean? They wouldn't do that. And no one's thinking, well, hold on, what support are you giving to this child? I just want to go back to one thing as well that you said earlier about that at 16, under the age of 16, it's a crime because they're not deemed old enough to give consent. There is still a grey area as well, because you can have someone who's 17 who's being groomed by a much older person, and we're not going to go into different semantics because we've covered that off as well, but that is huge, because 17 is only a year away from 16, even 19, 20. And if someone's a lot older or in a position of authority, yes, legally they can give consent, but that doesn't mean to say that they feel they're able to say their true feelings.
You can be a vulnerable adult up to the age of 25, and you can be a vulnerable adult for life if you've got a disability which doesn't allow you to be able to stick up for yourself, protect yourself as an adult. So there are, as you said, all of these other nuances and semantics, but we are talking about most of this child sexual abuse happening from the age of 4 to 11. Yeah, that's what the stats show, especially in the home environment. So that is why I was driving home 16.
Yes, absolutely.
You cannot consent. And you rightly pointed out there are these other areas that we need to keep in mind. Now, Bev, I know this is your area of expertise. So Mate goes on to say, trauma can manifest as illness. In books like When the Body Says No or The Body Keeps the Score, he explains how unresolved emotional stress and trauma can contribute to chronic illness, autoimmune disorders, and other physical conditions.
Yeah, and it's neurologically based. When you say and psychosomatic, when you say those words, sometimes people are like, "Oh, it's just in the mind." No, it's not. These are physical, real physical pains. Always has to be checked out medically just to make sure that there isn't some disease going on. However, there's so much research and it's continuing. And we also did that episode with Dr. Howard Schubiner, one of our podcasts. So anyone listening, go back and listen to that one as well. But that's where, in our brain, we have neurons. So for instance, our finger doesn't feel pain. It's the neurons in our brain telling us that that hurts because it's been cut. But if you cut the finger and you don't see it, you won't feel it. It's the neurons saying there's pain. So when we have these suppressed emotions that we're unable to verbalize and they become suppressed, there comes a time when the body is holding all of this, and it's actually the physical illness is part of suppression.
Well, any physical illness is showing you that there's something wrong, deeply wrong. Your body's highly stressed, overwhelmed, it can't deal with it, so it's showing up in some way.
And that's, when you think of migraines, and, I remember when I was suffering hugely with migraines, and then someone approached me because I was taking my medication in, and the pharmacist was saying to me, "Oh, this starts from your stomach." I was like, "No, it's my head. It's a migraine." I understand now why it's happening. It's because where it is it's severe stress. And it does start from the stomach, and it's where your stomach's shutting down, and then you're unable to digest. Your eyesight may go funny. I know I can't see out of one eye. I feel sick and this blinding headache. And it was only when I was able to start recognizing, the build-up, not when it was actually a migraine, the build-up. And again, this is about being able to acknowledge ourselves and listen to ourselves and listen to our body, which I'm not saying that, just because you've listened to this, you're going to start doing it. But there are some fantastic books out there. Gabor Mate. Sorry, got my words around the wrong way. And as you said, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, The Body Holds the Score, or Dr. Howard Schubiner, Unlearn Your Pain. I could go on, the list is endless.
There's so many,
and we'll put some of the books in the writing underneath, but it's a very interesting read, and I would say it is good to read because you're informing yourself. When you inform yourself, it really gives you that, and we've said this before as well, knowledge, and knowledge is power in the best way. Helps you to understand.
100%. Now, he says, going back to our speaking to your younger self or acknowledging what's going on, healing comes through reconnection. So there's a reconnection with your adult to your younger self that we're talking about. And he's saying healing trauma involves reconnecting with self and others and with the body. And there's so many survivors that I've personally worked with over the years that have just said they don't feel like they're in their body. They don't feel like they've got control of their body, that they just feel really disconnected. And he emphasizes that people don't need to be fixed, but rather need conditions that allow their natural self-healing capacity to emerge.
Yeah. And that's beautiful. And that comes back down to nurture.
Yeah. And the self-care.
And it's something, some people say to me, all you ever say is self-care. But the reason why I say it is because we don't know what it is, and we have to learn it. We have to learn how to nurture ourselves.
And what works.
Absolutely. Because what works for you might not work for me. And also recognizing, you know, like earlier on, we were doing a recording and we had to stop because my brain couldn't take it on.
Well, nor mine. We were just not on the right page together, was we? Because
No,
we've got so much going on in our own lives. We started on a topic and it just didn't feel right.
no. And but it's okay.
Yes.
And it's about acknowledging that. So, and then when we finish this, I will take time away to sit quietly. Whereas in the
Yeah.
past, when I was much younger, I would have moved on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to finish up this particular section, he said childhood experiences, this is Gabon Mate again, are central. He highlights that trauma often begins in childhood, sometimes not through overt abuse, which we talk about, obviously, because our topics are mental abuse, physical abuse, neglect, sexual abuse. So these are overt. He says, but through subtle misattunement, like a parent being emotionally unavailable. Now, I can actually say that sometimes, especially in the past, I've been emotionally unavailable to my children because I didn't know any different, because
Yes.
I didn't pick up those books. I didn't read them because I didn't know I had to read them. I didn't
Yes.
know that as part of my recovery that I would need to understand this thing called trauma and its impacts and recovery. I didn't know I had to do any of that. So I was emotionally unavailable at some stage. So inadvertently, I've now caused my children small t trauma. But I think if you look at all families, this goes on to some extent.
Absolutely. This is where I'm an advocate for parenting support for all families. You
Yeah,
know,
and I back that.
I'm a big advocate for that. Not to judge anyone, not to
No,
point fingers, but you know, we don't have the communities that we used to have where you've got bigger families supporting us. You know, we don't have that necessarily. And often we're isolated because people move to different areas. And I think it's so important. I really think it would be a great support structure for families per se. But you know, when you're talking about that, you know, when we think of child development as well, you know, child development, when we look at abuse, okay, if we look at physical abuse, we look at sexual abuse, the biggest figures are between the age of 4 and 11. And think of the development that's happening in the child, in their learning, in their styles of attachment with their caregivers from birth.
yeah,
You know, no wonder it's a big part of us as adults.
yeah,
And the
yeah.
more we try to disassociate from it, the more disassociated we become.
But the medical model as well, Bev, it's not set up to even like, I didn't know about the inner child. I didn't know that I needed to reconnect with my younger self and give voice to everything as part of my healing journey. Because the medical model just doesn't even look at that.
And
And
when,
Mate goes back to say trauma is a root cause behind human suffering, disconnection, and illness. And his work and our work is about recognizing the wounds with compassion and creating pathways back to the authentic self and wholeness, balance.
and when I very first heard that word of inner child, inner self, I was
Yeah.
like, that's too woo-woo for me.
Yeah. What you going on about, mate? Come on.
But then when I looked at the science to understand it,
Yeah.
that's where I come from. You know, I understand it now. Oh, that's a big part of my development that I didn't actually get. I didn't have
Yeah.
a normal child
Linear.
linear
Yeah.
childhood development that we like to subscribe to every child. And that's where it's important when we talk about trauma and people start to understand the impairment of the child development.
Yeah.
That's the part that really hooked me. Once I started
Yeah.
to understand it, it was like, oh, it's not that there's something wrong with me.
Yeah.
It's just I've learned to adapt in dangerous scenarios because childhood for me was dangerous. It wasn't a safe place.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that as a cultural shift, we need to have this information available to anyone that feels that they need it because they're stuck because of what's happened to them in childhood. And I just think that everyone, as part of the curriculum in school, we should just have a class for everyone where we stand up and we say, right, this is what normal childhood looks like as per the models, as per the learning. And if you have experienced any of this, and this, you may be feeling or experiencing this, and this. And if you want help, here's the help and support.
Yeah. And
I think everyone needs that base knowledge.
Absolutely. And you could start, there's one of the simplest places to start is asking, is anyone in the swim ever feel anxious at all?
Yeah. Yeah. Why?
Yeah. Well, even if they don't know why at that time, know, what's happening to you when you feel anxious? I know what happens to me. I know. But I remember I had a conversation with a young person not that long ago. And I was speaking to them about anxiety, and they said, no, I don't have anxiety. I said, what does anxiety look like to you? And they said, it's when you can't breathe.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. I said, are you aware that anxiety can look very different for different people? And this is what I see coming out in you. And then they were like, really? I didn't understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now once I've got an understanding, I'm not saying it stopped, but they're able to think, they're learning, okay, what can I do in that time? So that it doesn't go from anxiety to crisis.
Yeah. But this is,
so
we
simple.
don't know what we don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah? So that's why I really want to push that we need this baseline of education, because when we've got that baseline of education, we can do things differently. We can have the ability to respond to what is going on for us.
Absolutely. And also, if we're able to understand it at a younger age, we're able to access our emotions much quicker. And one of the bits, dissociative disorder, that's the medical term for it, but we can help start preventing that on such a scale that is being diagnosed, because it can be very disabling when actually it's an impact of trauma.
Yeah.
So to finish up, what's your last thought on this, Chris, before we finish up on this podcast session?
I think really that speaking to your younger self is not a woo-woo idea. There is lots of research, as you've explained, behind it all, and it's part of the healing journey. And we just are trying to share our knowledge, expertise, insight to just explain this on a level that people will hopefully pick it up, it resonates with them, and they can go forth and get them their own help and support that will help them, because just because something's worked for me, worked for you, it might not work for other people. But just having these conversations are breaking the taboo and the silence, and hopefully we can educate not only individuals, but also practitioners and professionals and workplaces. That's it, really, she says.
Well, I'm going to go on from there and say that sometimes, as scary as it is, some people are so scared to speak to people that they say, you need to see someone. And straight away, actually, no, most people just want to be heard.
Yeah.
They don't want to be fixed. They just want a safe space to try and learn and get in touch with how they're feeling. And if you can be that listening ear, you don't have to be a professional to be a listener.
Yeah. And as Gabor Mate said, you can't fix people.
No.
We've got to empower individuals to actually do what they need to do. So I was thinking about this morning. It's completely it was completely unrelated, but now it's not. When say like someone's living in a country where there's not water system, and we just keep giving them the water,
Yes.
they are always dependent on us. Whereas if we give them the tools to
Yes.
dig the wells, to put the water in place for themselves, then they've got the toolkit and the skill set to never depend on other people again. So we're empowering them. And this is what
Absolutely.
we're trying to do through these podcasts.
100%, and well said. Great analogy. So if anyone's got any questions, please get in contact with us. Breaking the Cycle 2stepforward@gmail.com. We will add some of the books that we've mentioned underneath so that you can follow them up and you can have a read yourself. If there's any other books that you read, let us know. We'd like to share that information as well. So thank you very much, as usual, for listening to us. And it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.